Yeah, how much are we talking?
Dan, how much is it? About 2,800?
It's like a little over 2,100 for
2,100.
the rapid flash beacons. Those are the rectangles. There were two different options. We went with the blinker sign, which is the LEDs embedded around the sign.
Right.
The rectangles cannot be used in unison with the embedded LED signs.
Oh, really?
It violates MUTCD, so it's one or the other.
Oh.
And I don't even think you could power them even if you tried, but
Okay. Well,
in order to meet it, you would have to remove the two diamond signs on each post, put a conventional metal sign
Okay.
without the LEDs, and below it you would put your rectangular beacon.
well, seeing that being the case, I think we should let public safety deal with this.
And wait?
Yeah,
Okay.
but thank you.
Okay, then.
Did
We'll let public safety deal with that at the end of this month.
Okay.
Thank you, though, Dan. Thanks, Bola.
Thank you.
Okay, then the agenda is approved. Next up, item 3A. I don't think we have anything. 4A, citizen comments. Anybody in the public care to address the committee? Now is your time. Report of committee and of chair and alderman. I have no report. Alderwoman O'Neill, do you have anything? Alderwoman Sims?
No report.
Alderman Weggie? No report. All right. Item 6A, city administrator report. I have none. The We Are Together St. Louis.
Hashtag, you have to put the hashtag.
Hashtag, thank you. Arch Apparel.
STL social media campaign update. A number of municipalities have started to promote how we all work together, and I would like to join that campaign. As you know, we partner with a lot of our neighboring municipalities on different things. For instance, the shared training officer with Clayton Maplewood, the mutual aid with all municipal fire departments that surround us, PARC, P-A-R-C, which is our Parks and Recreation Cooperative, and the senior program and IT program. And we provide photos that show what I believe the city of Bridgeton, city of Richmond Heights have done to start to promote IT and police departments. So we have a lot of opportunities to promote what we do together. So unless there are comments, I would like to direct Janet Levy to start that campaign for us as well.
Anybody have any questions or comments about this? The only question I have is, the attorney who is threatening to sue different municipalities, I'm assuming that we're fine.
This is different.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Do you need something from this committee?
No.
Okay.
No. We'll just
Great.
start it. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 7A, department report, Finance Department, February 2019 status report. Karen, are you going to take this?
Yes.
All right.
So, I'm sorry these pages aren't numbered. I gotta write myself a note. But the first page is general fund revenues. And the first thing to point out is that February of this year compared to February of last year, you can see that it's like about $500,000 less. That can probably be explained in the occupational licenses line item. We went from a very antiquated business license system to MyGov, January 1st for business license. There were some kinks that had to be worked out, and the biggest one was getting the businesses to learn how to use the system. And they did have to put a lot of data in. And it ended up, most of the collections, instead of coming in, usually they're in by February, most came in March. So you'll see that change in March. I even had to, that's over in planning and development now, not in finance, but Tom Heckert, our part-timer, helped them with phone calls. He actually walked some people through how to sign up and help them collect or pay and what they needed to do. I think it's great because it's online. They pay by credit card. It's much less manual than what we did before. And we can remind them now we were calling them last year, the previous years we were calling them, which is okay, but now we can send them out email notices, you are in violation, you need to pay, or whatever we want the email to say. So that's the explanation for that. General fund revenue, or expenditures, which is about, I don't know, 5 or 6 more pages back. Total general, it's after planning and development. That's the last department, general fund. Expenditures are about the same, a little bit up, but overall expenditures are right where we expect them to be at 86%. And revenues are over expenditures by 1.4 million, but again, that's because we collect all our business licenses, one of our bigger revenues at the beginning of the year. Capital improvement, everything is right on target as far as percentage-wise in capital improvements. Then there's stormwater. One thing I want to point out is on 6482 Manchester renewal, I was working on that today to give you all, obviously we've spent more than that, but they don't go through our quote books, so I have to do a special entry. I worked on that today to get us caught up through March. So in March, you will start seeing that number from what you've actually approved in warrant list. That's how I will get it on the books. I have to do something different. It's not a check we write. And then sewer, again, looks like for this month, we spent less than what we took in. Took in 40 grand and year to date, and we've only spent 20 grand. But I'm sure that's going to change because I've seen, what is it? What's the name of that company?
Pipe Solution.
Pipe Solution invoices come through. Well, you actually approved them on warrant list last time, and there'll be more Monday night. Other than that, if you have any questions,
Alderwoman O'Neill, you have one?
Yes, I do. Thank you. I'm trying to find the number of mosquito control. I was
Like what we spent?
6435. Because we had talked about discontinuing that, but some money has been spent, so.
And Alderwoman O'Neill, is that under Stormwater and Parks?
It's under
64?
Street
Yours, isn't it,
Department,
Mosquito control?
Is it
6435.
Streets? Is that streets?
Yes, that's streets. So yes,
So,
Mosquito control, 6435.
right. So it looks like there's been $465 spent, probably February. Does that, you recall that, what that's for?
We still plan on spraying during Brentwood days in our parks when we have music on the menu. So we did buy the solution that we will use to spray. We just do not intend to spray in the community.
is this one of those that kills the butterflies, or is this something that they've come up with that's a little better for the environment?
It's what we've always used.
That kills butterflies.
I don't know. In the parks where, okay, I'll leave it.
Okay.
All right, any other questions? Let's move on to number 9, eight, consent agenda. The only item on that is the minutes from the March 7th, 2019 meeting. Chair would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? We have none. 9A, old business, discussion on revisions to Chapter 135 Purchasing Code. Who's going to take a run at this?
So it's under old business because I think we've brought this up before. This was prepared for the January meeting and we held off, so that's why it's dated January 3rd. At any rate, we created a form last year this time. It pretty much mirrors our code and what the staff has to do and check off that Bola and I sign. And anyway, we started looking at what other cities do and what we do, and that's the attachment A. And the first thing I wanted to point out in this, on attachment A, is up at the top left for Brentwood, the amount of $500 to $10,000. The code says try to get 2 or more quotes from vendors. The problem with that is that $500. It is really hard to be efficient and get your job done when they're filling out paperwork for something that's maybe $502, or they're going on a trip and the motels itself is going to cost more than $500. So I just wanted to point that that's one of the biggest issues I think I could say that the department has had to have as far as amounts, that $500. The next thing is less than 2,000 purchasing agent, which by code is BOLA, the city administrator, without prior approval acquire goods on the open market. In addition to that 2,000, anything over 2,000, as you know, goes on a warrant list to the board. And obviously, as we've seen, you cannot approve something be paid. But at any rate, anything 2,000 or more goes on a warrant list, except for COPs. Let me qualify that, and we put everything on there. Then less than, well, let's just stick with Brentwood. So greater than or equal to 5,000, a purchase order or contract shall be issued and become valid only when approved by the Board of Aldermen. And then greater than 10,000, let me just go back up to that greater than 5,000. We don't really use purchase orders. It's in the code. But when we get the new software, accounting software, in the specs was use of purchase orders. So we're going to try to use that and implement it and work it with like our code. And then greater than 10,000, formal bidding process approved by the Board of Aldermen. The only other thing I'd say about this chart is you can see what the other cities do, and obviously Clayton's the most lenient, and they give, and also Richmond Heights, give a lot of authority to their department heads. And for example, if you look at the 5,000 to 25,000 under Richmond Heights, it says they just have to provide a written explanation to the city manager if the lowest bid is not accepted. I wouldn't agree with that. I would think the city manager has to approve it, is what I would think, not just accepting something that is not the bid, because that doesn't leave it all up to the department head. I don't think that we should do that. And then they don't go to bid until anything over 25,000. Formal bidding process and approved by the city manager. So again, it doesn't even go to their board. So the recommendations we would make are, there's two recommendations. So anything less than $2,500, not the 500, may be authorized by the department head after requiring a minimum of 3 quotes, which may be by email, regular mail, telephone, or fax, and they can use a consolidated quote sheet. Again, we may still require this form that Bo and I use, but it would at least give them the ability, or at least when they turn their check request in, we would have to see those quotes before we would say, yeah, we're paying it. And then the next one on that recommendation one is anything over 2,500 to less than 20 grand, minimum of 3 quotes, and then the approval by the city administrator is needed. Also, if you remember, things like that are going to be in the budget, which, let's just say someone did a Bobcat or something in the budget. Some would say, this is the board approval because it's spelled out in the budget. Based on that theory, then the city administrator could look in the budget and say, is that Bobcat in there? Did they get 3 quotes, or did they meet this? And then the city administrator would have the authority to approve that purchase. And then anything over 20,000 would be the formal bidding process, which right now ours is 10,000, and approved by the Board of Aldermen. Recommendation 2 would just anything under 20 grand, the quotes approved by the city administrator, kind of takes the department head out of it, and then the formal bidding process over 20,000. So A is the department head gets a little more leeway, B, no, but both of them give more approval authority to the city administrator.
Karen, thank you for putting this together. I did have one question on your attachment A. Under Brentwood, if it's over $5,000, it has down a purchase order or contract in excess of $5 grand shall be issued and become valid only when approved by the board. I didn't see that.
In the chapter?
Right.
Okay.
Right. Maybe it is. Just for the committee's my understanding is that there's really 4 things to keep in mind here. If the purchase is less than $2,000, then there's no Board of Aldermen action needed. If the purchase is over $2,000, then the Board of Aldermen action is needed. If the
2,500?
No, right now it's $2,000. If the purchase is over $10,000, then you need formal bidding process and is mandatory, and the Board of Aldermen action is also necessary. And finally, like Karen had said, if the purchase is between 500 and 10,000, then quotes from at least 2 vendors must be obtained. That's the way that's the way that I read the code right now. And under that, when the formal bidding process kicks in, there is an exception, and that's the sole source exception. And the example of that would be the billboard that we had, even though they came out of certificates of participation. That was a sole source. There was nobody else out there, and so you didn't have to go through the whole bidding process. But keep in mind that when we're talking about spending money, there's 2 components to this. One is to find out or get the right party to contract with, which is what the bidding process is. But the other component is whether or not we want to spend the money in the first place. And when we talk about this exception, the sole source exception, all that does is eliminate the bidding process. That says there's one company out there, we don't have to go through this cumbersome bidding process, but it still requires board approval to say, yes, we want to spend it. An example of that would be Arcturus that we dealt with last month. You know, that was, now I'm not sure Arcturus was a sole source, but still we did not debate whether we wanted to spend the money on that. So, staff's recommendation here is to raise, as I read it, really is to raise it from 2,000, which they need board approval right now, to 20,000, where that's when they would need board approval. But that also kicks in the bidding process. They're not eliminating the bidding process. It would still be there. And I honestly don't know this committee is going to be ready tonight to try and make any type of recommendation to the board. I just kind of want to give you my thoughts, since this will probably be my last meeting on this committee. But the way my view on this, my view on with the certificates of participation. But if this is to apply solely just to the budget from this point forward, one thing I think we need to keep in mind is that there is no emergency exception in place. What's cumbersome here is the bidding process. Getting board approval to spend the money really is not that difficult. What is time consuming is having to go out and find this entity to bid with, or to enter into a contract with. And the only time there's this emergency exception is in the concept of professional services. But if it's not professional services, there is no emergency exception. And if there is an emergency exception, staff still has to come to the board before they enter into contract with anybody to give the board the opportunity to deny that emergency exception. So one question I have is, do we want to apply this emergency exception across the board instead of having it limit solely to professional services? So if staff decides there's an emergency that it's not the hiring of an architect or a lawyer, but something else. I can't come up with a hypothetical, but
Repairs on vehicles.
Right, repair on a vehicle, exactly.
Ford's the only thing we can deal with.
Right. Instead of having to go through this cumbersome process of trying to find somebody, the staff can come to the board and say, hey, we got this emergency, and we need to go with this company, and we need to get this spent right now. So I'm not making a recommendation. I'm just saying that's one thing I think you might want to consider is, do you want to expand this emergency exception to outside professional services? And then the other thing I think to really tackle is whether you're comfortable with the only time you have approval on spending something up to $20,000 is in the approval of the budget. So Karen came up with a great example, that being the Bobcat. Under what's being proposed by staff now, if that Bobcat is $15,000, once we approve the budget, we're out of it. We're out of the formula. Staff can go out and they can spend that $15,000 on the Bobcat without coming back to the board and getting our approval. And again, I don't have a problem with that. I'm just saying, if that's the way this committee wants to go and bring this to the board, this committee is really going to have to look at the budget in the future and look at it even closer, because the backup that we have right now is we know anything over $2,000, they still have to come to us. Even though it's appropriated in the budget, if it's more than $2,000, they have to come to us to get approval. But if we raise it to 20, They don't. They have the right, and everybody understand what I'm saying about that? It just, you're going to have to look at the budget really close.
We'd still get visibility to those coming through on the warrant list.
But-
Not so much as an approval, but we would still see everything that's going through.
That's exactly right. And it would be more informational as opposed to approval by the board. You would know that they went and bought the Bobcat because it would show up on the warrant list. I think the recommendation is to keep the warrant list still at $2,000. So anytime there's an expenditure more than $2,000, it would still show up on the warrant list. Some of those items would need board approval, some of those would not.
So if to continue on the example of the Bobcat,
Right.
if we determine, we all want to focus our attention on $15,000 expenditure as a matter of the board. I mean, that would just be an indication that they've spent $15,000. They're not asking our approval, right? It would just be informational.
That is correct. That would be informational. That's how you would know.
I've got a number of questions, but is there, I can get on board with tweaking this, but I feel like my experience to now with the budget has more or less always been pass that budget because we'll get in the weeds later when the expenditure actually comes to pass. And I feel like the budget we have currently is predicated on that approach. And so I would be reluctant to implement something like this to apply to a budget that was passed with that lens. Maybe starting going forward, but because that was sort of the mindset. At least that was that would be
right. I hadn't even thought about applying retroactively. Is what you're saying? Is you would not want this to apply retroactively, obviously, to 2019 budget.
Going forward, all of a sudden, there isn't that kind of oversight. Do you how? I'm just trying to have an understanding of magnitude. How $20,000 was the number. Are the majority of expenditures under or 19.5? That such that. It's like that story about taking a congressman to lunch. You can't take something more than $20. So the cafeteria at the Capitol everything's.
I think the 20 was more just looking at what other cities do.
Okay. No, I was just looking. I understood attachment B to be the proposal. Is that?
Pardon me?
Is the attachment B was the proposal?
It is.
So I was just wondering, what was so it was purely a function of kind of surveying the comparator cities and saying, all right, this is where they are. Was there a reason it was $20,000 and not 15 and not 30? Because 85% of all of the expenditures that'll come to pass are going to be just under 20K. You know what I'm saying?
But like anything else, you ask for as much as you want in a budget, and then you wait for them to whittle it down. So
yeah, I'm concerned that let's say something. And I can't think of an example at the moment, but something escapes our scrutiny, and then we're thrown over the barrel because we weren't watching the budget. That's really kind of my approach. I don't think
it would. I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong. Well, I don't think it would be detrimental or any big deal if it went from 20 to 15. It would still give a little more leeway to the city administrator and as you can see, Brentwood's got some tighter controls than other places. So, no, there was no great, other than we were looking at what other cities were doing, and we certainly weren't going to go to 25,000, but 20 was what we just discussed and talked about to start the discussion, see what the committee wanted us to do.
Because Maplewood right now, as I read this, they can spend up to $2,500 without board approval. At $5,000, their formal bidding process kicks in. Compare that to us, they could spend up to $2,000 without our approval. Formal bidding process doesn't kick in until $10,000. So Maplewood, in that respect, is more restrictive than Brentwood is. But Clayton and Richmond Heights, their formal bidding process doesn't kick in until $25,000. So under those cities, they could spend $23,000, $24,000 without getting board approval. The board approval would be the budget, would be the passing of the budget.
But the budget isn't really an implicit approval, right? So we approve budgetary amounts in different accounts. So let's say in the Bobcat, that would be, you know, streets or something, right? So if they're underrunning some other thing, we haven't pre-authorized the Bobcat, we've just authorized a dollar amount that goes into that. So if you're underrunning, I guess you could have a, you know, spend all your money at the end of the year kind of deal, but we didn't really approve that.
But I think that's the effect, because right now, that's what's happens. We don't approve, I mean, we're not approving anything less than $2,000.
Right.
But we've given staff the authority to go ahead and spend up to $2,000 without our approval, as long as it's appropriated in the budget. Is that right, Karen?
Right, right. So, on the Bobcat example, those type of capital items are explicitly, you know, they're spelled out that they're gonna, like, the pictures, and we're gonna get this, and we're gonna get that, and whatever else. So they are, pretty much. So if someone came to you, or came to me in Bola and tried to buy, I don't know, a sanitation truck, and it's not in the budget, they can't buy the sanitation truck. You know, and it's gotta still go through, well, at least Bola, but it comes through finance too. So, but the fact that that Bobcat is in here spelled out and is approved at the legislative level, that is the board approval to buy the Bobcat. If it was $10,000 in a capital account with nothing spelled out, that's different, but we don't. We spell it out, you know. And I guess I would say to what Sonny's saying, I don't think I would want, if I were alderman, to do this now, maybe 2020, like you're saying, with the thought that the management is told, the department heads are told, you need to be pretty specific in what you're asking for in the budget going forward. They are now, but even more so. So,
I mean, yeah, and with what I said about the budget not really improving that, my thought, but I also think we need some flexibility on the lower. I think we as a community and everybody is spending a lot of calories on these low dollar things, and I would rather spend more attention on the larger dollar things, especially with Brentwood Bound and everything going, and, you know, empower our department heads and city administrator on smaller amounts. I mean, $20,000 is not a lot of money when you're talking procurement. It really isn't.
Yeah, and again, I'm not saying I've got a problem with $20,000. I'm just saying, with the budget effectively approving purchases up to $20,000, my expectation is that this committee will have to take an even closer look at the budget come the fall to make sure that when you approve a budget that's got the hypothetical Bobcat in it, you are approving the purchase of that Bobcat if it's under $20,000. You'll never hear from staff again on that. And if you're comfortable with that, then that's fine.
I have a question, because a Bobcat's a tangible item. When we're dealing with professional services, this does not spell out the difference. So
Well,
I'm comfortable with the 20,000 with a tangible item. I'm not so comfortable in terms of professional services.
Well, I think with professional services, it would still be the same limit. It would kick in at $20,000, but so you could get professional services up to $20,000. That's an interesting question. Would you have to have the professional services bidding process in place? When would that kick in for professional services? Would it be over 20?
Services. Ideally, we would go out for requests for qualification, requests for proposal, and then that process follows.
Regardless of the amount.
Exactly.
yeah, because we don't always know what they're gonna come back with.
Right.
And for professional services, it's based on qualification
Right.
and not the amount.
Yeah, because when you hire a law firm, you don't know how much it's going to be.
That's correct.
No.
It's the same way when we went out, I didn't get bids, I got, and they don't like to call them bids, and I don't even like to call them quotes, but when I was trying to get the accountants to do the audit work, or whatever you call it, on the COPs.
Right.
That was checking with them and
It's a
telling them.
submittal of proposal.
Right, right.
To
Yeah,
your scope of service.
Right.
to the scope of services, right. And then you don't know what you're gonna get back. And believe it or not, they were somewhat close, but we tried to go with someone who we didn't already have working for us. So, I just wanted to add one thing too about the, where did I find it. Under the 5,000 amount, that's another thing that is makes this whole code get complicated. Under section 135.060, availability of funds, this is where it talks about a purchase order or contract in excess of $5,000 shall be issued or become valid. That whole paragraph just is kind of in there.
Yeah.
It just gets thrown in there, and you're not, I don't know what it's for, basically. But if we go to purchase orders, period, I don't know what that has to do with availability of funds,
Right.
is what I'm saying.
Well, it seems it's excess, because we've already got it in there. If it's over
Exactly.
2,000, you got to
Yes.
get board approval.
Right,
I think that can get cleaned up.
yes.
Probably eliminate that, but
Yeah.
I think the issues for this committee, number one, do you want to, and I agree with Alderman Waggy, to increase the $2,000 number. The real issue for you all is to what amount are you comfortable with? And if you're comfortable with coming up with that number today, go ahead, we can vote on that and take it back to the board. If you want to give it some thought and take it up at the May meeting, that's your option.
I guess I think I would make a motion to accept.
Are you looking for the attachment?
Yeah, I lost my window here.
You want to see mine? I got a hard copy of it if that was.
So I guess I would make a motion to take recommendation 1 up to the board, with the thought that we would cause this to go into effect in 2020 with the new budget because of the changes.
Second.
Okay. Alderman Waggy, would that be applying to the certificates of participation as well? Spending of that money?
I don't know, because this is capital only, right? So are there capital expenses in the Brent as part of the certificates of participation, or is that
I
all
don't think this
services?
is capital only. This isn't capital only, is it? This is everything. This isn't limited to capital items. That's what Alderwoman O'Neill was saying. This would also include professional services.
So yeah, I guess I would say it would, as long as we're continuing, the audit system that we have in place for the certificates of participation, just because of the volume of things that we're going to see come through there.
Okay.
Just to be clear, what would the effective date be, like 1/1/2020?
Yeah. So after we've passed 2020 budget.
Right. Okay.
Can I ask
Absolutely.
a clarification then?
Absolutely.
So recommendation 1 is one, recommendation 2 is entirely separate. By accepting recommendation 1, we're setting the limit at 2,500. If we do recommendation 2, we'd be setting the limit at 20,000.
They both are setting them at 20,000. The only difference is with recommendation 1, you're also giving the department heads the authority to spend up to $2,500, which is not in recommendation 2. So you're with recommendation 1, my own personal view is between the two, that's probably the better of the two, because you're giving some more authority to our department heads. You're telling them, you have the authority to go ahead and spend up to $2,500 without board approval, assuming that you get the written quotes, like it says in there. There's a procedure that they have to follow, but they just don't have to come to us. Mm-hmm. Am I saying that correctly? Okay. That's what I agree with. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Do we need to take a roll call on this? Sure, why not? How about roll call, Shelley?
Chairman Dimmitt,
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill,
Yes.
Alderwoman Sims,
Yes.
and Alderman Weggie.
Yes.
All right. Item 9A is the Arcturus contract. For those of you who will remember at the last meeting, there was the question what to do with the Arcturus contract because it had not come to the board for approval. And it looks like Arcturus has agreed just to go ahead and drop the contract with no penalty to the city. Anybody have any questions about that? Wonderful. Move on to 9C, sales tax interruption insurance. Who's taking this?
About this. It seems like ever since I started.
Me too.
And we've asked the Slate Insurance Trust to go out and get quotes for the city. And they have different companies. They haven't found any company that, trying to find any company that is considered to be admitted in the state of Missouri. So they're called non-admitted in the state of Missouri. And what that means is that if the company were to go bankrupt, the Missouri State Insurance Guarantee Fund would not step in to help pay benefits and claims. Now, if the company were an admitted carrier and they went bankrupt, then the state would step in to pay benefits and claims. So we were asked to define what the coverage would be. So for instance, this would cover tornado damage, vandalism, earthquakes, and we were also asked to find out whether we could cover the 6 centers in Brentwood. For instance, Brentwood Promenade, Square, Point, Home Depot, the Meridian, and Schnucks. So this would be a 12-month coverage against interruption in the event any of those events I just mentioned, including fire, natural disaster, and terrorism, were to happen. So there are limits that we were asked to obtain, 3 million, 4 million, 5 million, and the premium for each one differs based on the coverage and the deductible. So what we have done is compiled all the information that we have collected over time for the committee to consider. This also includes catastrophic insurance, so it all falls within that definition. So we could go back and ask Slate to refresh these coverages for the city, and then bring that back to the city, to the committee, and the committee could discuss this some more and determine what the next steps would be.
I will just give you my 2 cents for whatever it's worth today. The idea of paying any premiums to an insurance company that's not being
An admitted carrier?
admitted in the state of Missouri, I could never get behind doing that.
Okay.
You know, the whole idea that if they go out of business, the recourse is with the Department of Insurance in the state of Missouri.
Right.
They license insurance companies. They have to meet a lot of standards in order to write policies in the state of Missouri. And that's the reason, is that if something, because the state's going to back them up if something happens to those insurance companies. So again, my only view is if you can find a company that is authorized to write those types of policies in the state of Missouri, then I could certainly support looking into it further. But without that, I think it's risky. It's a risky endeavor on a risky venture. Alderman Wahi.
Do we have any reason to think we'll get off of our policy of the 50% general fund balance anytime soon?
So as of the end of last year, so December 31st, we were, Karen, let's try to jointly find it. I don't think so. So end of last year, we were at 44.29%. And we're projecting that in 2020, it continues to go up 45%, 47%. I think in a 3-year span, if we limit expenditure growth, we might be able to hit that 50% by 2023, perhaps, 2022,
But generally,
2023.
you don't see any, hey, we're going to run it down to 15% to the emergency level.
It depends on the board. Because
course.
I'm going to control, and I have,
Right.
what departments ask for. They tend, and this is nothing against the departments, they should ask for the moon, and they do. And then I significantly cut it back and prioritize it over a time period. And I think we've consistently done that. And the exception is streets. We wanted to do all the streets rather quickly. Then the hazardous trees, we wanted to remove all of that and eliminate that danger, public safety issue. So unless something else comes up, so the only thing I can think of right now might be sidewalks. We have a number of, trip hazards that we're working with, what's the name of the company that does the? Woods Basement. So Woods Basement is doing half, city staff is doing half. If the board were to come back and said, we want it to be done just like that, Woods Basement can do it faster, but it's gonna cost the city. So that would be a time when you see expenditures going up. I know we're gonna probably talk about trash trucks, so, but that would be capital budget. If, for instance, however that discussion on trash trucks go, and the board were to say, we want to eliminate any chance of trucks breaking down, we want trucks that we can rely on, and Dan has a number of options depending on what the board goes with, that could impact the budget.
So I don't think this is worthy of any further conversation, honestly. I mean, the last time we talked through it, independent of the emitted in the Missouri issue, it was not really clear, what kind of circumstances would cover or not. And kind of the conclusion I personally reached was with the 50% fund balance policy, which we implemented 2 or 3 years ago, that is kind of our insurance policy against this.
Yeah, we're self-insured.
Right.
Okay. Anybody else have any? Okay, then I think you've got your marching orders. We won't pursue this anymore.
Look forward to talking about it in about a year.
All right, item 10A, risk assessment policy. Karen?
Yes, I will try to be quick about this. The auditors, as you see in my memo, pointed this out 2 times, 2 years. We do not have a official risk assessment policy. We did hire somebody, 14, 15, to do the internal control policy, which one would think would count towards that, but apparently this committee called COSO, Committee of Sponsoring Organizations of the Treadway Commission, which has something to do with the AICPA, has standards and that we are supposed to have a risk assessment policy. So I had Tom Heckert, who is our part-time person who is also a CPA, work on this for me. And he's the one that did the bones of it as far as what areas we checked. He actually checked. It's kind of like a mini audit, checking with the departments on what we do with cash receipts, and the departments that have cash. We went with the larger revenue, which is obviously sales tax, and then expenditure reporting, went over those. And we pointed out things that are, that we could fix or change or tweak, and then again, we would continue to monitor it. But based on the fact, and this was all done in 18, that's why you're not getting this finalized report till now, is asked that you recommend it go to the board. And I want to also tell Alderman O'Neill, thank you very much for checking those things. There's a few things she pointed out, particularly grammatical, and then one was the use of the letters ERP. That is manufacturing more, which was Tom's background. What we meant by that is our financial reporting system, not an enterprise resource planning. But that's in a nutshell. We would continue to monitor this. This could change. We could come back again and make a report of maybe we would add other items, take some items off. But we had to do a cost-benefit analysis. We can't do this on everything that is in the city. You just can't do it. There's not enough time. So we had to decide, and we picked the bigger things that we thought there might be areas of risk. Obviously, cash handling is one of them. And that's the document we have in front of you. And if you would approve it, we would like to put it on as a resolution for Monday night. But that's up to you guys.
Any questions for Karen? Chair would entertain a motion to take this risk, what are we calling it? The risk assessment policy to the board for both the first and second reading on Monday.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Any other questions? Roll call, please, Shelley.
Chairman Dimmitt,
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill,
Yes.
Alderwoman Sims.
Yes.
And Alderman Weggie.
Yes.
Next item on the agenda is the citizen comments. Again, anyone in the crowd care to address this committee? Okay, Chair would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Say aye. Aye. It passes. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
They are, again?